time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnor Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most honored watch, and Whitnor, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines.
Good evening. This is David Ross. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope, Mr. William Bradford Huey and Mr. Robert Colborne, an editor of Business Week magazine. Our distinguished guest for this evening is Mr. Paul C. Aebersold, director of the Isotopes Division of the United States Atomic Energy Commission.
Mr. Aebersold, you, of course, have just arrived from that fabulous place, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and I believe you've spent most of your adult life in atomic energy, so I'm sure that you're equipped to give our viewers an up-to-the-minute report on developments in the atomic energy field. First of all, sir, can you illustrate simply for us how extensive the atomic energy program is today?
Well, the atomic energy program is big business. It's about as large as any of the largest corporations in the United States at the present time. When our expansion program is complete...
Not quite as big as U.S. Steel.
Not quite as big as U.S. Steel, but it'll be about $8 billion at the end of this expansion period, which means about $200 or more per family invested.
In other words, every American family now has $200 invested in atomic energy. That's a total of about $8 billion.
That's right. Everybody.
How many people are working for it now?
About 100,000 people work on the program and operations. And construction, there's a large...
Those people aren't directly working for the government.
These people don't work for the government. Only about 6,000 people work for the Atomic Energy Commission itself, so that most of the work is actually done by private industrial contractors.
Well, is atomic energy a government monopoly at the moment?
Well, in some senses it is, because legally certain functions can only be done by under government supervision. But the Commission is exploring ways of having certain phases of atomic energy program taken over by private enterprise.
Now, what are your specific responsibilities in the program, sir?
Well, I'm concerned with peacetime applications or byproducts of atomic energy called radioisotopes. These are radioactive atoms that we make at Oak Ridge with the reactor.
Can you explain that a little more, Mr. Aebersold?
Well, of course, that's a technical term, but I think it'll become as popular someday as radio, television, all other terms that were technical at one time.
Can you show our viewers can you illustrate just what an isotope is?
Yes, they're radioactive atoms. I have a couple of bottles here. This is a bottle of radioactive iodine. This is a bottle of radioactive phosphorus. And we can make radioactive forms of all the elements around us here.
That bottle of iodine is just like any other iodine, except some of the atoms in it they give off radiation.
Yes, by radioactive I mean that they give off rays, atomic rays, that
and you
are
can detect those with an instrument.
Like those from radium and X-ray machines and so on. These give off similar radiations.
All right, now what can you do with that bottle of iodine that you couldn't do with a bottle of ordinary iodine?
Well, these radioactive iodine atoms can be traced because of the atomic rays that they give off. One can follow them with atomic instruments. You can follow extremely small quantities of radioactive atoms. You can follow as small as a billionth of an ounce.
Well, now, what does that mean? What does that mean in medical research, for instance?
Well, they're called tracer atoms because we can put these into a biological system. I mean, a plant or an animal or a man even, and trace where these atoms go. For example,
well, if I swallowed that bottle, the iodine would go to my thyroid just the same as if it were ordinary iodine.
It would behave in your system just the same chemically and physically, just like iodine, and your body doesn't know the difference, except that it gives off rays, and you can find out where it is. Those atoms are saying, look, I'm iodine atoms, I'm here in your thyroid gland, and to the scientist, then you can tell where they are.
And also, if I happen to need some rays in my thyroid, as I might if it were too big.
That's right. There are two uses.
Get a treatment.
There are two uses for these things. One is as tracer atoms, in which you use very, very small amounts to find out where these atoms are going. The other is to use them as sources of radiation to
just
produce,
like X-ray.
Like X-ray, to treat, or to do something in industry, like take pictures and so on, so that you can use the radiation in a practical way.
Well, now, how much use is made of these radioactive isotopes now? Very many people using them?
Well, there are over 1,000 institutions in the United States that are using isotopes, and we've shipped out about 40,000 shipments all over the country.
These would be hospitals and laboratories?
Hospitals, research laboratories, and now several hundred industrial companies are making...
How would an industrial company use it?
Well, they again use them in two ways. One for research to find out mechanisms, or how things act, what atoms are doing, and all kinds of processes.
Well, how would you say, what could you find out about an engine with?
Well, you could, for example, you could send us a piston ring, and we could put it in our reactor at Oak Ridge, and the atomic rays in the reactor will make this piston ring radioactive. When you put in a motor, when the piston goes up and down, you wear off a little bit of radioactive iron. And we can detect that way as little as 100,000ths of an ounce of wear from the piston ring while the motor's running.
Now, you couldn't find that much that much wear if it weren't radioactive.
It would take you months to get the same answer on comparing one lubricating oil with another, or comparing high-speed operation of a motor with low speed, whereas with a radioactive piston ring, you can get this information in a matter of hours.
That is, I put this piston ring in, run it for an hour or so with one oil, run it for an hour or so with another oil, and from the amount of the radioactive stuff that comes through, I can tell which oil is wearing it more.
That's right, and you can do it without ever opening the motor and making no tests. I mean, you don't have to change the conditions at all.
What are you contributing to cancer research?
I'm glad you asked that, because we've had a very active program. The Commission not only distributes isotopes for cancer research at reduced prices, they're to about 500 hospitals around the country, but the Commission itself has a large number of research contracts in fundamental biology and medicine, several hundred contracts in universities and research institutions throughout the country. So the Commission has had a very active program to help in cancer research.
Well, now, what about agricultural research? Are these isotopes useful in agricultural research?
Well, they're used in all fields of research. As a matter of fact, agriculture, pure science, and medicine and industry. Now, in agriculture, they're largely used as tracer atoms. That is, to find out how a plant utilizes fertilizer from the soil, or how the plant takes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and makes sugar.
I'd like to go back to this cancer thing a bit, Mr. Aebersold. Are people curing cancer with isotopes?
Well, the word cure isn't very popular in the cancer field, because it's difficult to say that you've had a complete cure. But people can be alleviated of the disease. The symptoms of the disease can be reduced, so that people can live longer and live more comfortably.
That is, you can get radiation to a cancer with isotopes more easily than you can with X-ray in some cases.
We have machines that have been made using radioactive cobalt, for example, which gives off a million-volt rays of 1,000,000 volts of energy.
It's like very high-powered X-ray.
That's right, like a very high-powered X-ray, except much cheaper.
What about security and secrecy in this field? So you have shipped these isotopes overseas to all the free world, haven't you?
That's right.
In other words, our government is not imposing any security in this field. We are sharing the peacetime knowledge and uses of atomic energy with the rest of the world.
That's right. We're very happy that in this particular field that there is not any security. These atoms are just like atoms of ordinary elements, except they're radioactive. There are other people in the world now who make radioisotopes. There are reactors, or these atomic ovens, as we call them, in many other countries today.
Well, now, coming back to the atomic energy program in general, sir, was the free world hurt? Did we suffer from the atomic espionage?
Well, certainly we did, but I'm happy to say that I don't believe that there are any U.S. scientists of any note that were involved. I think that our own security program was very well handled, and is being well handled today.
Now, you recognize, that there's still great need for secrecy as far as the weapons development program.
In weapons development, there's a need for secrecy, but even there, there's a philosophy.
Is it possible to overdo secrecy so that it restricts your own development?
It does. It can. Therefore, there's a philosophy that security, another phase of security is security by accomplishment. The more you can accomplish, keep ahead of the other fellow, do it faster. And we can do more that way by as much information as we can release that will help our own science and technology, will further our...
The two kinds of security can contradict each other to some extent.
You can have security by secrecy, and you need some of that, particularly in weapons and military applications. But if you overdo that, you're restricting your own scientific progress.
Well, now, how much is the atomic energy program going to affect the life of the average American in our lifetime, sir?
Well, it will not revolutionize our lifetime, because we've already had a revolution in technology in this country in the last 50 years. So that it's hard to say that atomic energy is going to revolutionize things. But it will it's a powerful new source of energy. There will be atomic power for useful purposes within the next decade, certainly. These research uses
with present fuels like coal or
well, not competing, but
water
supplementing. I think that they won't. Atomic power won't replace the coal or oil, but it will supplement, and there will be many uses for this power.
Well, now you mentioned that we now have about $8 billion invested in the atomic energy program. Now, is most of that waste? I mean, is most of that in weapons or in material that can be used only for weapons?
I'm glad you asked that, because actually only about 15% or something like that of our expenditures are on a purely military program in which you might not get anything back. But about 75% of the effort is in making this atomic explosives, fissionable material we call them, uranium,
get you anything back?
uranium and plutonium. And those can be used, that material can be used for useful power, and it's stored there.
How would you do that, Mr. Aebersold?
Well, you see, this doesn't decay rapidly. Plutonium and uranium don't decay rapidly, and they're just as good as gold, except that they're a source of energy. So we're storing up a future potential source of energy.
Well, now, as a final question, sir, most Americans have heard it said that maybe atomic energy was going to be the device by which we just destroyed all human life on this planet. Do you feel that the program is going to end an eventual destruction of human life, or do you think that it may be an agency by which human life is made better for everyone in the world?
Well, I don't think man was put here to destroy himself, and I think that our stockpile of atomic weapons is really a great thing for national security. I don't think other nations will risk war with us. As long as we keep foremost in the atomic energy, atomic weapon field, it's a very great thing for national security. In the long run, I think there'll be greater contributions from the peacetime aspects than from the military.
Well, thank you very much for being with us this evening, sir, and this has been very reassuring.
The opinions you've heard our speakers express tonight are entirely their own. The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Mr. William Bradford Huey and Mr. Robert Colborne, an editor of Business Week magazine. Our distinguished guest was Mr. Paul C. Aebersold, Director of the Isotopes Division of the United States Atomic Energy Commission.
Most Honored Watch, and Whitnor, distinguished companion to the world-honored Longines.
Good evening. This is David Ross. May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope, Mr. William Bradford Huey and Mr. Robert Colborne, an editor of Business Week magazine. Our distinguished guest for this evening is Mr. Paul C. Aebersold.
It's time for the Longines Chronoscope, a television journal of the important issues of the hour, brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A presentation of the Longines Whitnor Watch Company, maker of Longines, the world's most...
Simply for us how extensive the atomic energy program is today.
Well, the atomic energy program is big business. It's about as large as any of the largest corporations in the United States at the present time. When our expansion program is complete...
Not quite as big as U.S. Steel.
Not quite as big as U.S. Steel, but it'll be about $8 billion at the end of this expansion period, which means about $200 or more per family.
Director of the Isotopes Division of the United States Atomic Energy Commission.
Mr. Aebersold, you, of course, have just arrived from that fabulous place, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and I believe you've spent most of your adult life in atomic energy, so I'm sure that you're equipped to give our viewers an up-to-the-minute report on developments in the atomic energy field. First of all, sir, can you illustrate... In other words, every American family now has $200 invested in atomic energy. That's a total of about $8 billion.
That's right. Everybody...
How many people are working for it now?
About 100,000 people work on the program and operations. And construction is larger...
Those people aren't directly working for the government.
These people don't work for the government. Only about 6,000 people work for the Atomic Energy Commission itself, so that most of the work is actually done